Okay, Reuters Events are pleased to be joined by Josh Carmichael, Vice President Global Hydrogen at Wood. Josh has more than a decade of experience in the renewable energy field and is considered a leader both in the renewable energy and transportation sector. As part of his role as a director of hydrogen in South Australia, Josh helped initiate a number of hydrogen projects and the development of the state's hydrogen roadmap. More recently in Europe, Josh was instrumental in delivering 20 hydrogen fuel cell buses in Rotterdam. Josh, thank you for joining Reuters today.
Thanks, and yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited for the discussion.
Great. Well, a lot of interest in hydrogen currently, to say the least. As an organization at Wood, in each stage of the life cycle, how do you see a hydrogen economy being formed in practical terms?
Yeah, so maybe for those that don't know, Wood is it's a leading consulting and engineering company across the energy and built environments, and actually helping to unlock a lot of the solutions to the world's most critical challenge that we face. And I think most people can agree that hydrogen going forward is definitely one of those topics and will be critical, but also requiring a lot of different expertise to unlock those solutions. So Wood as a company provides consulting projects and operations. And actually, as a firm, it's our major focus in hydrogen to enable this transition with our clients and partners. So that's a bit of an introduction to Wood. Maybe looking at the different phases. So as far as I see it, there's kind of three phases where basically you've got the production of hydrogen. That's basically where you make it. And here we talk about the different colors from green, blue, and gray and others. Second is the storage and distribution. So how you move it, and that'll depend on where you sit in the market and the region. You can be electrolyzing electricity or gas networks or ammonia, for example. And third, how we use it. And in those cases I gave, it could be that it's going to an industrial user or a household. It could be as ammonia for fertilizers or bulk storage, or it could be gas into a network or even electricity. So those are kind of the three phases as I would see it. And the opportunity for Wood is basically endless because we've got the expertise and experiences across all of those areas.
And if you had to pinpoint the biggest opportunity, where would you see that?
Yeah, I think if I look at the first phase, for example, so here Wood's actually a leader in the steam methane reformer technology, SMR, which is considered, if we look at the colors from gray, number of years of experience in this. It's actually how today hydrogen is primarily produced. So we can help clients in that area. Going forward, if you look at the green hydrogen from electrolyzers, requires a lot of water, networks, this type of stuff, feed, consulting, and also in the blue area, gas and gas networks, the brittleness, the ability to handle the transfer of gas from its gas form into liquid or into electricity. These are all areas of expertise for Wood in that first phase. But then also as you go down the chain and you work with others, we've signed a number of collaborations and MOUs with electrolyzer companies and others which haven't been announced, where we can start to look at the project development and the offtake scenario downstream as well as a partner. So definitely those would be the kind of the key areas for Wood, I think, that could be of use.
And can low carbon and green hydrogen actually be deployed and scaled up quickly enough to reach those net zero targets by 2050 or even earlier? And what do you see as the main challenges?
Yeah, so the answer is definitely yes, and you're right. There are definitely challenges. What I've learned in my experience through my career, first with large scale utility batteries, and later also with renewables and electric and fuel cell buses. In the beginning, there's always a hesitation around technical and commercial. Technical, is it up to scratch? Does it work? And commercial, the numbers don't always stack up. There's not enough scale. And certainly for green hydrogen, this is the case today, where hydrogen is up against, for example, batteries in transport, but it's also against gas in the electricity generation. So I think technical and commercial, it's got some areas of improvement, but cost and scale. It needs a lot of regulation, policy changes funding and investment from private and public sources for this to really get traction. And I think there needs to be some new clusters that are being developed. You see in Rotterdam, Hamburg, these areas where a whole range of producers of the energy and the end users come together to get the projects up in a large way, in a scale, to drive down those costs of both the supply of the fuel and also to increase the demand so that we can get over this catch-22 situation that it now sees itself in.
And you mentioned the comparison with batteries. What can the hydrogen learn from the battery industry in the coming years?
Yeah, so there's a couple key takeaways from there from me. So the battery project we did in South Australia, the 100 megawatt battery, we learned a lot in that process. And at that time, there was a leading kind of graph, if you like, of produced by one of the consultants that showed energy storage across the number of megawatts in size and duration in hours and days. And at that time, batteries was only seen as, a few minutes of maybe 10, 30 megawatts worth of energy storage. And we did the project of 100 megawatts in less than 3 months with our partners, Hornsdale and Tesla. And everyone came to the table and we overcame a lot of the obstacles: policy, regulation, operating procedures, commercial. All of these things were overcome in a short time frame. And actually, what the battery industry did with well was they made it known that maybe they were down in the bottom left quadrants for energy storage, but they were there for energy stability. They were there for frequency control. And that's what the project achieved, and it introduced competition into the frequency control market, which is also a source of irritation as part of the energy transition as we go forward. And it made it known that that's what it would be there for, and has grown from there to be a larger source of energy over a number of hours into the hundreds of megawatt hours. And I think for me, hydrogen really needs to make that step where it needs to change from getting confused about what color is the generation. So, gray for SMR, blue for gas, and green for electrolyzer. And then you've got purple, pink, turquoise. Every other day there seems to be a new color. The hydrogen industry for me needs to get on the same page that, yes, it's important to understand where the hydrogen is coming from through certificates of origin that's being developed in Europe and in Australia. But irrespective of the color, how are we actually going to deploy this infrastructure at scale for the end users that are going to need this source of fuel, electricity, or whatever it might be, and start with that narrative: the benefits of hydrogen for the grid, the benefits of hydrogen for the gas networks. This needs to be, for the industry, for me, a priority going forward, so that investors understand what exactly they're buying into when they start putting the enormous amount of capex into these projects.
I mean, the pace of change, and you touched upon it there, it is phenomenal. The new technologies and projects announced almost daily, along with a growing number of players entering the market. How are yourself and Wood positioning to stay ahead of all these trends and the growth?
Yep. So the way I see it, I think we can support or work alongside and lead clients with this kind of strategic insight and technology solutions that we already have, whether it's through SMR or partnerships with electrolyzer companies that I mentioned. But it also, starts to look like, as the industry develops and new players come in, and I saw this in the electric bus industry as well, the industry is ripe for investment for a number of different players for different reasons. So private equity, asset infrastructure owners, they want to make these investments for reasons that were probably different to maybe 5 years ago. I think that's where Wood can also play a leading role in really looking at those partnership models, those consortiums, and project delivery models in each region: Australia, Europe, the US, UK, these type of markets, and bringing that to the table with the governments and the connections that we already have as a leading figure in oil and gas and renewable sector of wind and solar, and now increasingly energy storage around hydrogen and eventually battery.
And then on the demand side, is one of the final questions. Which applications do you see making up the demand for hydrogen? This is obviously a bit of a hot debate, particularly you can go down what size vehicle, or whether shipping, or this, that, and the other. For you, where are you most excited by?
So the question of, where do I see the biggest demands? It really depends on where you sit geographically as well as in the value chain. For example, I know that the Japanese and Korean, the markets there, they're a huge importer of energy, so they would love to see it come in the cheapest way possible, and that might be as ammonia or liquid hydrogen, for example, for electricity use or into gas turbines in the Japan market. At the same time, the companies, investment companies in the projects in Australia and Europe are also Japanese and Korean companies and gas providers as well. So the demand where I see is broad. It's going to be everything from looking at the electrolyzer versus the gas carbon capture storage in the gas networks and electricity. It's ammonia for storage and export as it is liquid hydrogen as well. And in the end, the commercial side will dictate as much as the technical on what will be kind of the winning formula. And personally, you asked the question, what excites me? I'm an avid fan of aviation. I've always loved it. I've loved travel as a kid. So for me, the sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, is an interesting area, and I think would love to also play a role in this area in the short term as well. And also I would love to see that kind of convergence between transport and energy come to the fold in the same way that electric have been successful with batteries. I'd love to see hydrogen be a real player in that convergence with the heavy fuel trucks, ports, ships, these type of areas. So that's for me what excites me.
Absolutely. And I suppose then final thoughts and comments from our audience. Will hydrogen reach those big global ambitions? Any of those key challenges that you think need to be addressed now and in the long term? And also, will we touched upon it earlier, but will those net zero targets be achieved with a hydrogen economy?
The answer is absolutely yes. And for me, the reason is glowingly clear. If I look at, for example, the automotive industry, for a long time we had hybrid models and EV was on the cusp. Then Dieselgate happened and all of a sudden we had EVs. For me, the other day when you had in a single week Shell being told by a judge that their emissions were not sufficient by 2030, ExxonMobil had activist shareholders come on the board. The companies that are going to be responsible for the deployment and the offtake of hydrogen are the ones most in scrutiny and under pressure from shareholders to do something. And not all sectors can be electrified, and their hydrogen has a real role to play as well. So there is a lot of people vested in the success of hydrogen, and therefore it will be, for me, at scale, required on a global level to be successful, and I think we'll get there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Josh, and thank you for speaking to our audience.
Likewise, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.